Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Howard Heckman. I'm one of the developers here at PTS. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys a little feature-focused webinar on GPIO, or General Purpose Input Output, with ClearStream RFID, and how you can kind of add that onto your installation, or just see how everything works, so that if you have a future install, you can go ahead and add third-party peripherals to notify people of events and things like that, or use sensors to trip the reads. So I would like to note that before we get started that we'll have a question and answer period at the end of the webinar today. So if you have any questions as I go through anything, just feel free to use the question panel. As always, if I don't get to your question, or if you think of something afterwards as you're trialing the software, I'll have our contact information up at the end of the webinar as well, so you can send us the questions. We'd be happy to get you the answers you need. Okay, so with that, before I start talking a little bit about GPIO, I would like to, for the new people hopping on this webinar, just talk about really quickly about what ClearStream RFID is. ClearStream RFID is a very easy to use fixed RFID application. It allows you to quickly add fixed RFID readers to the application and then map those readers to a pre-existing database, text file, or Excel spreadsheet. There's no programming involved with ClearStream. It's just all point-and-click configuration. You're adding your readers. You're selecting where you'd like the tag information to go that those readers scan out in your environment. And then finally, you can control all of the properties of those readers. So you can control when they're scanning for tags, what triggers them to start scanning for tags, the power level of the antennas, all different properties of the reader you can configure within ClearStream. So it's really intended to be a easy to set up fixed RFID solution. Rather than having to go with custom software for a custom application, you can use ClearStream to integrate fixed RFID maybe into a system you already have. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump into talk a little bit about what GPIO is. Now, GPIO is something that adds a lot of power to your ClearStream installation. It allows you to control third-party peripherals with your RFID reader, or trigger your reads based on activity at a portal. So most readers come with a GPIO block available on the reader itself, and it has different inputs and outputs that you can wire up to these third-party devices. So they could be things like motion sensors and things like that, but it allows you to hook these third-party tools up, and then ClearStream RFID will power those tools based on these settings that you configure within ClearStream. So again, most fixed RFID readers will come with these GPIO blocks. From the pictures, you can see there's a couple different ways that you may see it. On some Impinj readers, it's kind of an add-on box that you hook up to the reader. On some other readers, like the one down below there, it's a block that's actually at the base of the reader, where you can insert the wires that would connect up to these third-party peripherals that you'd like to control using ClearStream. Now, the readers will come with many different numbers of ports. You could see readers with 2 inputs, 2 outputs. You may see readers with different numbers. You've got 4 inputs and 8 outputs. But that's going to be manufacturer specific. It's something you may want to consider when purchasing a fixed RFID reader. If you wanted to hook up a lot of lights or a lot of sensors in order to trip reads, you'd want to make sure you purchase the reader that's appropriate for that installation, so it has enough inputs and outputs for what you're trying to do. Okay, so first on the GPI, or general purpose input side, what can you hook up to these? So this is most commonly used for motion sensors or light sensors or things like that, where you want to turn the reader on only while there's activity in front of the reader. So this is most commonly set up in like a portal type situation, where maybe you have a loading dock. You don't necessarily want that scanner, the RFID reader, always actively scanning for tags. You may just want to turn it on when there's activity going through the portal. So that's where the inputs really come into play. You can hook up these inputs so that when the user walks by the reader, it senses that motion, turns the reader on, and then the reader can be configured to scan for X number of seconds, so that you're only capturing tag information while there's motion in front of that reader. So that's most commonly what these are used for. You could also hook up things like physical buttons. So if it was like a doorway and you wanted to, once the door swings open, it trips a button or closes some circuit, you could also have that trip the read to turn the scanner on. So that's most commonly what the GPIs are used for. You can also configure them, like I mentioned before, there's multiple inputs. You can use that for directionality in some cases. So if you put something like a photo eye on either side of a portal, ClearStream will allow you to record which GPI had triggered that scan for that duration of time. And if it's the trigger on the inside of the doorway or the outside of the doorway, you're capturing that, and then you can tell the motion that if it was tripped on the outside of the doorway, that activity is going towards the inside of the room, and you can capture that with all of your tag information. And now a little bit of the outputs. Now the outputs, you can use a lot more different types of things. You can really hook anything up that would accept some signal from the RFID reader. The most common ones you see here are light stacks, buzzers, or PLCs to control like conveyor belts or something like that. But you can control these for things like notifying people of issues, if there are ever any error conditions, if your tags aren't being successfully posted to the database, you could trigger these lights so that there's some indication other than actually looking at the reader itself that there's some type of issue. So things like buzzers you could use for security type installations. You know, a tag that's not supposed to go through a portal can sound a buzzer and flash a light at the same time, so that if there's a security officer there or something like that, he can take a look at what's going on at that portal and why this item that's not supposed to go through that portal is now tripping the buzzer. So really, it could be anything that is it can be signaled from the RFID reader. The readers will put out a certain voltage, usually a 5-volt output for most readers for some type of signal. So that would work with a PLC or something like that. Some readers also have a 24-volt output for, say, 24-volt light stacks or something like that, if that's a requirement. It's manufacturer-specific and something you may want to consider, again, with what hardware you're actually choosing for the installation. Okay, so with that, I'm going to jump out of the PowerPoint here and actually kind of demonstrate some of these features to you in ClearStream and how you configure them for your installation. So I'm going to hop out of the PowerPoint. Now, one thing I'd like to mention before I hop into the application, everything you see here today when I'm demoing this is available on our ClearStreamRFID.com site. If you click on the Take a Trial link up in the top of the screen there, you can go ahead and download ClearStream RFID and trial it yourself. The only limitation is a time frame for how long you can use ClearStream, but other than that, you can go ahead and use all of the inputs, the GPIO settings that I show you today, or just some of the general features of ClearStream to start scanning tags and sending tag data to a destination. So you can trial everything. We always encourage you to go ahead and do that. You can download the software, and then if you have any questions or anything you want to reach out to us at that point, that's always a good option as well, because you kind of learn the software a bit and kind of understand how things work. Okay, so let me move that out of the way. So I'm going to hop over to ClearStream. Now this is on our new version 4.0 that I'm using today, which was released recently. So for those of you who are already familiar with ClearStream, I would recommend go ahead and download the new version of the software. But I have some of this configured already for this demonstration today. Since it's not a getting started with webinar, and it's a feature focus on GPIO, I've configured a couple different things here so I can show you how to set up the inputs and the outputs on the reader. The first one I thought I'd start with is the input. And now I have a motion sensor hooked up to a reader that I have configured here that I'm going to go ahead and configure so that when there's motion detected from that motion sensor, it trips the read for some duration of time. And I'll talk about the different settings you have for that configuration. So I have here a GPI tripped read process. My source of tag data is this GPI reader I called it. It's a Motorola Zebra FX7500 reader, and I have that hooked up to a destination database, the RFID tag list sample that's provided with ClearStream when you install the software. So that is here, and if I go to that database, you can see right now it's empty. There's no tags in this table. So what I want to do is now actually trip a read and start scanning tags into this database here. Now this database is again provided with the installation of ClearStream, so it is something that you guys could use and configure with your installation of ClearStream. You don't have to have something already in place. You can use the sample that's installed with the software. So go back to ClearStream here. I have this reader hooked up to the destination, which is my RFID tag list, and I have it set to a simple append operation on the destination. So really, anytime this reader scans a tag, it's going to send the tag information that you see down here below, the EPC, user memory bank, an antenna name, a date, timestamp, and so on. It's going to send all of that tag information over to this RFID tag list, which is now empty, and post that as a new record into the database because it's set up to do an append. Now, the most common setup for this is a continuous mode scan. A lot of our users will just set up a continuous mode. So that what that means is when you go to the start-stop form, and if you were to start up this reader, that reader is actively scanning for tags constantly. It's always going to be scanning for tags and sending tags back to the database. Now, let's say you didn't want to do that. You have a motion sensor. You want to hook that up. Well, the first thing you do is wire it up to the appropriate ports on the reader. Now, this might be different per motion sensor. Typically, you'll have 2 outputs on that motion sensor that you would hook up to the port you'd like to on the reader, and you would find that generally in the user guide. So let me actually show you that. Generally, in the user guide of the reader, you will see a diagram like this. And I know it's a little hard to see, but you'll see a pinout of all of the inputs and outputs on the reader. So you would look in here for, say, input 1 or input 2, or whichever one you want to hook this up to, and then wire up that motion sensor to that input. And then generally, you also wire it up to a common or ground on the reader as well, so that that motion sensor will basically close that circuit between the input 1 and the ground on the reader, and it'll start scanning for tags. That'll trip the read. Let's go ahead and configure that for this this sample here. So I'm going to jump back over to the configure form. I'll click on my readers list. I'm going to just simply switch the scan mode over to GPI Trigger. So now, rather than when I hit start, it's scanning for tags, I'm going to hit start. It's not going to do anything at first until there's activity in front of that motion sensor. So I switch it to GPI Trigger. The only other thing I need to do is actually add a GPI item to this GPI list here. So here, if you add 1, it'll be port 1, and you can give it a name. You can say port 1, and I'll talk about what that's used for in a second. But then you also specify for how long you'd like to scan for tags. So this is in seconds. I'll just put 5 seconds here. So this is basically telling it, if GPI port 1 is tripped, go ahead and turn this reader on for 5 seconds. Scan tags for 5 seconds. Now, this name field here, which is port 1, that's an important thing to use, like I mentioned before, with the directionality, if you wanted to use it to track that as things are going in and out of a room, because it's captured as the start event of the tag. So you can see on the left-hand side here where I have all of these fields, I have EPC, tag identifier, user memory bank, and so on. There's also this start event field. Now, if you're using continuous mode and you hit the start button here, that event is called, I think, Management Studio started the read. If you're using a GPI trigger and it's tripped, it uses the name of the GPI that you placed here. So every tag that's scanned during this 5-second duration will be posted with a start event of port 1. So you will know that port 1 is what tripped the read. So if you're doing some type of directionality, you can make sure that it's port 1. If you're walking through that portal, it's tripped. That would be then a check-in if it's going into the room, and vice versa if it's coming out. And in that case, you may give it something more appropriate, like a name of checked in or checked out. But for the demo today, I'll leave this as port 1. Now, one more other feature here. There's this send tags when read checkbox down in the bottom corner here. What this does is it tells ClearStream to send the tags that are read during these 5 seconds to the destination either at the end of the 5-second duration or throughout the duration of that 5 seconds. Now, if you have this off, that means it's going to send it at the end of the 5-second duration. And what that means is, for the 5 seconds, there's no activity in ClearStream. It's just accumulating tags that are read for the 5 seconds. At the end of it, it sends it to the destination and posts it to the database. Now, in that mode, it only reads unique tags. So if tag 100 and tag 200 are sitting inside of that read zone for the duration of the 5 seconds, at the end of the 5 seconds, you're only going to get those 2 tags sent a single time to the destination. So you'll get 2 tags in the table. If you turn this feature on, send tags when read, throughout the course of the duration of the tag going through that read zone, it's constantly sending its tag information to the reader. So you'll get duplicates in that case of the tag. So I think most commonly people will have this option turned off, and that's the default. But it's important to note that if you wanted additional information as that tag traverses the read zone, you would want to turn that option on so that you're getting that tag information sent to ClearStream. Now, I set up a single port here. I only have one sensor hooked up to mine, but if you have multiple sensors, you would simply hit Add to add an additional port that would trip this read. And then you can go ahead and configure the options for this port as well. So now if port 2 were tripped, it'll read for 5 seconds as well. But it'll attach this port 2 name to the start event. So you know exactly which motion sensor or photo eye tripped the read, and that gets captured with the tag information that's sent into the database. This debounce time here, this is a new feature for 4.0. It's only available with multiple GPIs hooked up to the reader. Basically what this tells the reader to do is to go to sleep for a certain number of seconds after a read stops. And the reason this is useful is if you have activity through the read zone and you read all of the tags you want, you can have the reader then go to sleep so that maybe if there's some trailing activity at the end of that, the reader won't turn on for that time frame. So if you only want to read, say, a couple tags a single time and get through that read zone, but maybe there's other activity going on, you can turn it off for that duration so that you don't get duplicate reads. It doesn't immediately turn back on and start scanning for tags and maybe grab those same tags. It almost gives it just a timeout time for everything to kind of calm down in front of that portal before it'll be allowed to trip again. It's just an additional option so that you can control how often the reader will turn on every time it's tripped. Okay, so I think this is all I wanted to set up here. So you can see I switched it from continuous mode to GPI Trigger. I now have my ports hooked up. It's not going to affect anything that I have these 2 here. I don't have a sensor hooked up to port 2. I only have it hooked up to port 1. But I'm going to go ahead and actually power this reader up and show you guys how this works. So again, the access database is clear, so there's no records in here. If I hit refresh, it's empty. If I now go to Start Stop, I'm going to save my project. I'm going to hit Start Selected on my GPI reader. This will power the reader up. Now the thing you'll notice here within this mode, if you were in continuous, you would notice running would go to true and inventory in progress would also go to true because it would be actively scanning for tags. But since I'm using a GPI trigger, running is true, however, inventory in progress is false, and that's because nothing has tripped the read yet. It hasn't started scanning tags. So what I'm going to do now is actually walk over to my reader and wave my hand in front of this motion sensor here. And once I trip it, you should see, if I come back, you'll see, yeah, the inventory progress goes to true for 5 seconds, and now it just went to false. And if you saw that down below, at the end of the 5 seconds, it sent that tag information to the destination. So if I bring the access database over here and I hit refresh, you can see here it read 44 tags, which should all be unique. There's no duplicates here, and sent them to the destination for that time frame. You'll also notice that because I have port 1 hooked up for the start event, it captured port 1 information with each tag read that was tripped. If I had a second port or motion sensor hooked up that was port 2, if I tripped port 2, you would have port 2 was the start event for all of those tags. But you can see here it read 44 unique tags. If I were to then go ahead and trip that read again, we'll approximately get double those that number of tags. So here it's set to true. I'm going to walk back over here, and I'm going to go ahead and wave my hand in front of the reader. It'll power that reader up. Should go to true. Yes, it's set true. After 5 seconds, it'll finish up, send the tag information to the database, and now I had 44, and if I hit refresh here, it went to 87. So you can see I missed one the second time that I didn't get the first time. However, in our offices here, it's very tough to keep RFID tags in a sorted fashion. So You can see here I read 2 sets of tags. Now I probably have duplicates for each, or 2 for each tag. If I were to do something like filter, set a filter up here. You can see here I just filtered on one of the tags, and I have 2 reads for that tag in the table. So that should be approximately 2 tags every time, because I just walked through and tripped this read zone twice. It read those same bunch of tags that were going through the read zone. I have them sitting in front of the antenna here, but it read them twice because I tripped it twice. So it's important configuration in ClearStream, because not only do you get the benefit of not running the reader constantly, you also get the benefit of controlling the tags that get sent to the destination. You're only getting those tags that are in the field of view of the antenna once. Each time that reader is tripped, it sends it to the destination. Okay, that's kind of what I wanted to show you on motion sensor. Now, on the inputs. Now I use the motion sensor here. Again, you could use buttons, you could use a photo eye, really anything that's going to close that circuit for the input that you wire up to the reader. But it should give you an idea how you can configure the reader not to just be scanning all the time as you would be with a continuous mode read. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this reader for now. Now the next portion of the webinar today was, I was going to show this actually in the emulator, because it's a little tough without a webcam here to show you the flashing lights and buzzers and things like that through the webinar. And I thought the emulator might be a good way of showing you how that works. So what I have configured for the emulator, I have 2 additional setting here that's wrong. I have 2 additional sync processes. I have a track storage room sync process and a security gate sync process. And these are hooked up to 2 virtual emulated readers that I have configured here. I have storage room and front entrance, which are reader 1 and 2. The storage room I have set up in a continuous scan mode, and I think I have that same for the front entrance, continuous scan mode. The storage room, I thought I'd throw this in here to make it a little more interesting. I have 2 antennas hooked up to that reader, one called checked out and one called checked in, to show you how you can check items in and out. And that's basically it for these 2 readers that I have configured. So I'm going to go ahead now over to my virtual site survey that I have pre-configured for you guys. And I'll show you what I have here. So this is my facility where I want to hook up fixed RFID. Now we have a storage room over here on the right-hand side. There's a main facility area in the middle, and then there's a front entrance down below. So what I have set up for the demo today, this reader here, which has 2 antennas hooked up to it, is going to be used for check-in and check-out purposes of the storage room. This is updating the database with whether or not these items are in the storage room or outside of the storage room. Over here at the front entrance, I have this hooked up so that it will power up this little light stack. You can see I have this light stack with a single red light in the emulator, and it's going to light this light up when items that aren't allowed to go through the storage room pass by. Okay, so this is just tracking in and out of the room. These are being these 2 items, which are going to be the ones that aren't allowed to leave. This is an industrial item, and this is a PC. These aren't allowed to go through here, so these should trip the light. These ones won't, and then this is just used to track everything as it's going in and out of the room. So let me go ahead and talk a little bit about the configuration over here. So again, I have both readers in continuous mode. For the track storage room reader, I have that hooked up to that same table we were using before, so that's why I just cleared it out of data. It's the RFID tag list sample. And in this case, I have it set to be an update existing append if not found, based on the tag was scanned. So what that's doing is every time this reader for the storage room right here scans a tag, it's updating that tag list with the tag and whether or not it's checked in or out of this room. So it's just keeping track of these items as they go through this doorway here. For the security gate, what I have here is I have the front entrance reader hooked up to a table called protected items in that same database. And then I have this set up to be an update existing. Now, if I go over to my database and I open up my protected items table, you can see what I have here is I have two protected items. I have 0001 and 2. These are my two protected items. And then I have a scan date and time that is when they are, if they're scanned at this portal, it will be updated with the scan date. But this is basically a table that you would use or configure in your environment that would be items that are not allowed to go through that portal. And generally, someone would maybe add an interface to add these. You know, they might have a web page that says add a protected item or add items that aren't allowed to go through this portal. And you can add them to this table in some other way to track these items. So I just have this protected items list with parts EPC 1 and 2, which if I go over to the simulator, I can see I'll click on these. Move this go-to. I'll click on these, and if I hit on the tag list, you can see this one is 0002. That's the tag that's affixed to this item. And this one here is tag 0001. And then these ones are not that. They're higher tags of 6 and so on. So these ones should be allowed through that portal. These ones are not allowed through that portal. And these ones will cause that light to trip when it is when it reads that. Now the way that works is on the front entrance reader, I have it hooked up again to this protected items table. I also have update existing turned on based on the EPC. So when the front entrance scans a tag, it attempts to update the destination table. And since the destination table only has these two items, 1 and 2, these are the only two items that are going to be updated. Now there's a result there, a condition when that happens. If it successfully updates, it'll return 1. If it doesn't, like if it tries to post a 006 to this table and it's not found, it's going to return with 0. So I'm going to use that to trigger the output on the reader. So I have this configuration set up here. So I just need to go over to the readers dialog again, select my front entrance reader. I'm going to clear this out so I can configure it again for you guys. I'm going to select my front entrance reader, and I'm going to add a new output. So similar to the inputs, now I have something wired up to port 1. I'm going to change the activity in ClearStream that needs to occur to power up this port. In my case, it's going to be a destination data update. So that means if I try to post a tag from this front entrance reader and it updates the side, that's what I'm listening for in order to power up the port. The next thing I need to do here is power up for how long I would like that light to turn on. So this is in milliseconds, so I'm going to do 500 milliseconds. A half a second is going to turn that light on. I'm also going to change what process and condition it's listening for. So in this case, this security gate is process 2. So I'm going to change it to process 2. And the condition is going to have to be 1 in my case. So basically what this means is power up port 1 anytime an update occurs that is successful, that returns a value of 1, on this sync process 2, because this reader is hooked up to sync process 2, and turn it on for 500 milliseconds. That's really all you need to do. So this reader is going to be posting and updating to this table. When it does that, it's returning a value of 1. And because our reader is configured to listen for that, it's powering up port 1, setting it to true, for 500 milliseconds. So I hope that makes sense. So what we'll go ahead and do now is actually save this. I'm going to start the emulated readers. I won't start the FX7500. When I do that, you'll see the read zones for the antennas went to green, and also little lights came on these readers. One thing I want to do to show you how this works, I'm going to check these guys in. I'm just going to move these into the read zone on the inside of the storage room. And what that does is ClearStream just scanned those and posted them to the destination database. So if I go to the RFID tag list, I have 4 checked-in items. These are the ones that are allowed to leave the room. So you can see they're marked with checked in. Now if I were to actually take these items and move them out of the storage room through both of these read zones, and go back to the database. I'm going to refresh this database, and you can see now 2 of the items were checked out. And if I go back into the read zone, because it's going past these antennas and updating the database with that information, I'll refresh this again, and now everything is checked in. So you can see that setup there is used just to track these items as they go in and out of the room. Now for the protected items, so let's say we grab one of those ones that we're going to check out one of these. We go this way. This one happens to go out, wander out the front door. It's going to go through. You saw that light just remained red there, or dark there, so it didn't do anything. But now let's take an item that's not supposed to go through that area. I'm going to move this PC here up. See how this PC now is causing that update to occur to the database. And now you can see it just is flashing that light red. Now in the emulator here, we only support the light stacks. You can put multi-light stacks in the emulator, but this would be the same for a buzzer. If this happened to be a buzzer here, it would power up an alarm or something like that that someone could listen for and know that there's some kind of issue going through this read zone. So again, you can take one of the items that are allowed to go out. You can walk them out of the storage room. You can walk them right out of the facility. And now if there's no light there because it's allowed to leave. And if I go to the RFID tag list, you can see I have 2 items checked out, and they were checked out at 11:36, as opposed to the other ones which were scanned earlier than that. So again, this simulator kind of shows you how you can set this up. If you guys wanted to do this and you didn't have any equipment, this is a good way just to make sure everything would work the way you were intending it to work. It only shows lights, but you can hook up buzzers and things like that, or PLCs. And in more advanced setups, you can use PLCs to control a conveyor belt based on items that are being scanned and things like that. But really, anything that you could hook up to this reader that accepts an input, you can configure with ClearStream. And then based on the different events that occur in the reader configuration area, you can power up all those different ports. So if you had different items on here, if you wanted to power up, say, the same, say you on port 1 you had a light, but on port 2 you wanted to hook up a buzzer, you could go ahead and power that up with the same settings here. So again, on the reader that's hooked at the front entrance, if a data update occurs on the destination and it is successful based on this condition of 1 here, on process 2, that goes by the process 2 here, power up the buzzer and the lights for 500 milliseconds, for half a second. Okay, so I think that's everything I wanted to show you guys today about how to hook up GPIOs to ClearStream and add them to your configuration if you already have one installed, or if you have new installations where you'd like to set and use these features up. I hope this helps out quite a bit. So with that, let me jump back over to the PowerPoint. Bring the PowerPoint here. Bear with me while this swaps the monitors around to the wrong side. Switch this. Okay, before we get to questions, I'd just like to mention that we do have a limited number of RFID kits available. So if you wanted to trial something more than the simulator, the emulator that's built into the software, reach out to your resellers or to PTS for an RFID kit. The kit comes with the hardware, antennas, and some sample tags, and as well as the trial software, so you can get up and running, testing everything I showed you here today. It's kind of a better way to test read performance in your environment. The simulator is good for showing you the features, but if you have a certain type of environment that may affect RFID, the actual equipment is the way to go for that type of testing. So we have a limited number of these available if you'd like to reach out to your reseller or to PTS to talk about that. We'd be happy to help. And with that, if you guys have any questions, bear with me while I hop over the question panel here. No questions so far. Okay, here's a question that just popped up. Using the simulator, how many readers and items can you track? I saw the tag list that you had available. Can you affix multiple tags to the same item? It's a very good question. Good catch, too, by the way. Yes. So in the environment here, you can really configure as many of these readers or antennas as you like. There's no limit to them, and you can add as many of these items as you'd like. Some things you can do additionally here. You can change the type to, say, something like a pallet. And in that case, you probably have multiple tags on this pallet. And to change that, you would simply go to the tag list collection here, and you can actually enter multiple strings to this list here, so that it's you may have 10 tags affixed to this pallet. You can go ahead and put all of them in this list here. I have a question here. Can we try Clearstream again if we have tried it before with GPIO? Yeah, if you just want to reach out to us and you download the software, if you've only run it in trial in the past and you want to take a look at some of these features, that is no problem. Just go ahead and download the software. You probably have used an older version, so you'll want to go to our website and download the latest. And then just to request a trial code from us here at PTS, and we'd be happy to get you that trial code sent over to you. Okay, any other questions? I will bring up the PowerPoint. Again, just if you guys have any other questions, please feel free to send them over. I will bring up our contact information here in the meantime, though. Okay, so here's our contact information. Again, as I'm talking here, if you guys do have any questions, please send them in this question panel. But here's our contact information. If you guys think of anything, again, we always encourage you to trial the software, download it from our website, take a look at all of the features. Again, you can trial everything that I just showed you today using the trial and see how everything works. You can even hook up actual equipment in trial mode, so it's not just through the simulator. You can hook up physical equipment to see how everything works. And as always, if you run into issues or questions or anything that you'd like to get a response from us on, please send that over to the contact information that you see up here on the screen. But as long as there's no other questions, okay. Nope. If there's no other questions, I do appreciate everyone. A question here that just popped up. Can the pins be used to output more complex data like a sum count? Unfortunately, no. We can only turn the pins high or low based on activity through Clearstream, like what you've seen here. So it won't output more complex, like numerical values or something that you wanted to send out over the webinar. That's a good question. If it's something that you wanted maybe customized, that's something else that we do with Clearstream. If you wanted to reach out to us after the webinar, we'd be glad to discuss maybe specific install that you have. That's always an option as well. Okay, well, as long as there's no other questions, I appreciate everyone hopping on the call today. We look forward to, again, to seeing you all in a future webinar. And as always, if you have any feedback for the webinar today, or you'd like to see particular things in the future or certain feature focus items in the future, please reach out to us. So as long as there's nothing else, I appreciate, again, everyone hopping on, and have a wonderful day, everybody. All right, bye-bye.